Okay, this is our introduction to curve fitting. The first thing we're going to talk about is our correlation coefficient and our scatter plots. So, any kind of graph that has just a bunch of points on it is known as a scatter plot, or XY scatter, if you're used to the Microsoft Excel terminology. Any of these scatter plots, there is a correlation, and by correlation we mean is how close are the dots together, or how close are the data points together. So if I'll notice, these go from a strong to a weak. So the stronger the correlation, the closer together the dots will be. So this one would be very, very strong, our first one. Our second one would be a weak correlation. And the last one would actually be no correlation, because the dots do not form any sort of pattern. Now your strong correlations in relation to our correlation coefficient are going to be very close to 1. So this is close to 1, plus or minus. Could be positive or negative. Okay? If there's no correlation, then it's going to be very close to 0. Alright? In between, so this could be 0.7, 0.8, 0.5. Alright? So that's our strong versus weak. Now we have to know what the sign indicates. Okay, the sign indicates slope. So obviously plus would be for a positive slope, and then minus for a negative slope. So my first graph here, if I were to put these in order, I would name this a strong, and then looking at the slope, I would say it is a negative. So it's a strong and it's a negative because I have a negative slope. The second one also has a negative slope, but it is no longer strong, it is now weak. So I would expect for my strong, the correlation coefficient to be very close to a -1. So R would be about -1, very close to -1. Whereas with the weak, it's going to be a negative number, but not close to 1 necessarily. In the center we have our no correlation. This is where our R value would be around 0. Okay? Now we're headed up the other end of the scale. So we have a weak, but this time, you are correct, it is a positive slope. And then last but not least, we have a strong positive slope. And with the strong positive, we would expect R to be close to +1. So our correlation coefficient is a verbal description. Correlation is a verbal description of the amount of data that is on the curve, so strong versus weak. The coefficient, or the R, is an actual calculation, and we're going to do those through the calculator that represents the percentage of the data that is on the line of best fit. And this concludes our introduction to scatter plots.